All right, can you hear me okay? I have good news and bad news. The bad news is this is the last session. The good news is I'm giving it. Okay, maybe I got that backwards, but we are in Vegas. So that makes me the headliner, right? Hey! Speaking of Vegas, decades ago, back when I was an early junior green marketer, no comments please, I came here to an event in Vegas. I'm not much of a gambler, so I wanted to learn how. So I went to the crap table, and I'm standing there looking at the numbers, and this guy walks up, he's got a bright green shirt on, and he smiles, and he takes out a marker for 10 grand. They give him a $10,000 loan, he signs for it, takes his $10,000 worth of chips, sets it on the pass line, hands me the dice. Like, what? I have no idea what I'm doing. My heart's pounding, my palms are sweaty. So I take out my measly $100 and I figure, okay, I got to do something here. So I put it right next to his and I roll the dice. The first number comes up. Guess what it is? 5. All right, so I close one eye. The second die pops up. Guess what it is? 2. Now I have no idea what this means. So I look over at him, and he's got this blank expression on his face. I don't know if he wants to hug me or kill me. He starts to smile. They hand him his 10 grand. He flips me a $100 tip, walks away. I grab my money. I make a beeline to the bar for a drink. And I decided after that day, I don't like gambling. Too much stress, not doing this, all right? Where's my little thingy? This it? Thank you. So, isn't that what we product marketers do often? We're gambling, we're rolling the dice, we're trying to see if this is going to work or that's going to work. We do these A/B tests all the time, right? So I decided to take a different track. Many years ago, I was this guy underwater doing stuff, and then later learned about this topic called neuroscience and science, and really got intrigued by it, wrote some books about it. I think I'm up to a dozen books now, hit the list a couple times, and decided to really dig into it, so I went to a Harvard course. Hated it. It was really boring. But I did learn some stuff about neuroscience, and then along the way, read a couple of really cool books. Has anybody here not read or heard about Simon Sinek's Start With Why? Okay, I can see nobody's raising their hand, so that means pretty much everybody has. How about The Challenger Sale? Is this a familiar book to everybody? Heard of that one? Okay. These actually have become two very widely used, very strong, if you will, frameworks that a lot of organizations use today. I decided that I would take a different approach. So the book that I've got coming out next year is Start With Who. And I really think this is a key topic that gets lost in no translation. We forget about who we are trying to market to. We start with why, that's good. I think we need to start sooner with who. Why will the people that we are trying to market to care? Yes, we've talked about personas. Yes, we've looked at all these profiling techniques and so on. I think it goes much deeper to that, into the human brain. So let's dig into this a little bit more. Once upon a time, let's go back to another story. After having served as an executive in a few firms, I launched a marketing consulting firm, and we had a number of different clients: Cisco, SAP, Visa. One of our clients was HP. And I was asked to audit a sale for a Fortune 50 company. I sat down, and into the room walks Mark Hurd, the CEO at that time. And this rep's doing a pretty good job. She starts to use what's called spin selling. That was the precursor many years ago, prior to the Challenger sale. And Sandler and Miller Heiman came out about the same time. Doing pretty well. But the CIO was getting irritated, a little bit frustrated, didn't like what was going on. So Mark Hurd interrupts and says, hey, let me tell you a story. And he proceeds to tell this interesting story about how he's trying to get to the airport. He's late. It's San Francisco. There's a lot of traffic. Not sure which gate he's supposed to go to, if he can catch another flight. And his daughter's sitting next to him with her mobile phone. She says, hey, Dad, I got you covered. Pops it out, tap, 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 tap. Takes care of it. And he said, a light bulb went off, and I realized that HP did not have a good mobility story. We really didn't have our act together. And that shocked us, because back then you didn't admit to your weaknesses. Nobody did that. But the CIO really liked the transparency. But he also really resonated with the story. The light bulbs went off for me even stronger, and that's when we launched this program. At the time, we called it Vector, and we were digging into the neuroscience, the neuromarketing, and so on, and trying to see how this would work, because they were using neuromarketing in the business-consumer side, but hadn't yet adapted it to the business-to-business side. So we came up with a way to blend in the storytelling and the science and some of this social selling, because LinkedIn back then was just starting to hockey stick, okay? That led to quite a few success stories. A lot of folks adopted this. But what we discovered along the way is the Venn diagram. We had to align with three key things. And I'll give you an example, Symantec. 4,000 salespeople, 42 product lines across 8 geos, 50,000 channel partners. Now, do you think all of them were trained on one sales methodology? Oh, no. Oh, no. This was a hodgepodge. It was this mixed bag. Spin, Sandler, Miller Hyman, Challenger was just coming on. So we had to align with all of it. We had to overlay on top of that. If you remember nothing else from today, that's pretty key. If you're rolling out something across your sales teams, whether it's sales enablement, your messaging, whatever it is, if it doesn't align with the way your teams have been taught how to sell, they will reject it. They will not use it. This is the biggest obstacle we came up against. We also discovered the persuasion model. Now, back then, Nancy Doherty with Resonate, you may have heard of that book. She came up with visual stories. We looked at that. Some pretty cool stuff there, but again, there was a lot of things out of alignment, especially the sales methodology alignment, and the science around the storytelling aspect of it. The 3-act play, Hero's Journey, are all things we've heard of, but now we're going to get into some really cool, fun stuff. We ready? Okay, here we go. All right, this dude used to wear fancy bed sheets and threw wild toga parties. And without the distraction of Netflix, the Greeks studied each other. They sat around and looked at each other and tried to figure things out. And he came up with this persuasion model where he decided that in order to persuade someone, so that's persuasion, it's sales, it's marketing, right? You have to balance your arguments, your communications across emotional, instinctual, logical triggers. Very key. Neuromarketing came along 2,000 years later and rediscovered this. So neuromarketing is used across all these companies. And I'll give you a couple examples. Yahoo changed one color on a click-through button, increased their click-through rate by 30%. Procter & Gamble changed the way the hero image, you know how we put the hero image up at the top? They changed the view of the hero image. Instead of looking at you, the hero is looking at the headline. They did the fMRI measurements, doubled the resonance, doubled the number of people looking at the headline, which is where you want them to go. You don't want them looking at the hero. Hey, yeah, I remember that guy, but I don't remember what that company was trying to tell me. What good does that do us? Now we know from neuroscience, this came from the late Paul D. McLean, who's written 20-some books on this, that Aristotle was right. We've got to have logical, which appeals to our neocortex. That's the more logical part of our brain. And we also need to appeal to the emotional part of our brain. And we also need to appeal to the instinctual part of our brain. If we can balance that properly in our messaging guides, in the frameworks that we come up with, we'll have a more balanced message. And I'm going to show you exactly how this can be done across all kinds of content. Okay? All right, so stories. Now we know that some stories don't impact anybody's brain. They know who they are. But for most of us, if we have logical facts, it'll only impact that neocortex. Only two parts of that. But if we tell a story properly, according to the London School of Business, a bunch of neuroscientists all say the same thing, 14x. Now we forget 90% of what we've learned 30 days later. So think about that from a sales enablement perspective. Also think about it from your prospect's perspective. They'll forget what you told them wherever it was, unless we do a better job of telling a story. And all throughout my entire career and what I heard here all through the last couple of days, we want to tell stories. Let's tell stories. So I decided to really understand this down to the minute level. And back early when I was learning how to write, I went to the Maui Writers Conference, thought I could tell stories, thought I was an okay writer. I sucked, let's just say. I was, I think, the worst writer that walked through the door. Now, 2 weeks later, I was voted most improved. So what's that say about what I was when I walked in the door? But what I did learn was a lot about how to set your pacing, how to create a protagonist, how to create a sympathetic character. There's all kinds of little tricks and stuff. And along the way, ran into a couple of number ones and begged them to teach me how to do this properly. It took a long time. But if we think about how a story is structured, anybody here not know The Wizard of Oz? Okay? I encourage you to read L. Frank Baum's he wrote it in 1900, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the actual book, not the movie, the book. And look at the kind of copy, look at the words and the phrases that he uses in this book. It'll blow you away how incredible it is in bringing this story to life. But in a hero's journey, our hero starts in the ordinary world. They're comfortable. They've got their faded blue jeans on. They don't want to leave. That's our prospect, isn't it? They're pretty comfortable where they are. That's about 25% of your story. Act 2 is actually divided into two parts, Act 2A, 2B. And that's about 50% of your story. That's where these mean flying monkeys come after you. It's raising the stakes in the game, which also raises what? The value. If you don't raise the stakes for your prospects, they're not going to care, and your value will stay low. So you'll never get past your price. It'll always be too high if you don't go up to the climax of the story, okay? And that's when I'm melting. We get the witch. That's the climax of the story. And now we return home. There's no place like home with what's called the magic elixir, which is the knowledge that we've discovered, okay? Let's find out how to do this by blending in science. It's going to have some fun here. In Act 1, how does our prospect feel? Adequate. They're kind of comfortable. Anybody know who your biggest competitor is? Your number one competitor. Mr. Do Nothing. Exactly. That's why your prospects are comfortable in their ordinary world. what our job to do is to raise two chemicals in their brain, actually a neurotransmitter and a chemical. The neurotransmitter is dopamine. That's the feel-good neurotransmitter, and it's the anticipation of something exciting or interesting, like, I don't know, winning at the crap table. Anybody know what oxytocin is? All right. This actually is the most important thing you should remember from today. Oxytocin is what they call the trust chemical. If your oxytocin is low, you will not trust. If your oxytocin is high, you will trust. Every top salesperson will tell you this fact. 90% of customers buy on trust. 90%. If they trust you, they'll buy. If they don't trust you, they won't. So we need to raise oxytocin in the brains of our prospects. That's our job. If we do that properly, they will love us and our brand almost as much as their dog. Not making this up. Scientifically proven. This is Act 1, about 25% of your story. Then you go into Act 2. We want the prospect to feel concerned. We're raising cortisol in the brain. That's a chemical that kind of like a yellow light. Now we want to get tense. Now this is what gets left out. That's the one key thing that gets left out of all stories. I've seen it with top salespeople, and I see it all the time with marketers. We start with a little bit of, hey, here's who we are. Oh, here's a problem kind of in the industry. Oh, let me take you right to the solution. We bypass this. We're not raising the stakes, and we're not making our customers feel tense. I can't tell you the number of times I've sat in boardrooms where CMOs have said, I want my customers to feel tense. I want them to like us. That's not going to get you a sale. You have to scare the crap out of them. I'm sorry. That's where it is. Now, there's a difference between fear-based selling and risk-based selling or marketing. Fear-based is you're going to die if you don't buy our stuff. Risk-based is we want to prevent you from harm. We are wired in our brain 3 times more motivated to avoid a harm or a loss than a gain. And what's it tell you about your value props? Now we want them to feel satisfied. You cannot impart logical information to someone who's freaked out. Okay? You ever try that? It does not work. Trust me. You've got to now calm them down. This is where Sherlock Holmes walks onto the scene, puts all the pieces together, and logically concludes the story. Okay? Certain colors can be used to do the same thing. So when we use colors within our marketing, that's how they're used. There are certain things we can do, colors, phrases, and so on, that can actually help our prospects to hear the message you want to deliver. So here's how it lines up. Okay, there's Aristotle, there is your storytelling framework, and there is your sales framework. See how that all lines up? That's what we need to do. Make sure that all lines up. 1, 2, 3. It's that simple. 1, 2, 3. Okay? Now, this isn't exact science, but literally across, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, we did a tremendous amount of research on this because we really wanted to understand. And surprisingly, we found that mostly influencers prefer a more emotional type of messaging. And evaluators, if you will, the ones that like to kick the tires, are a little more logical, especially in the tech industry. And then decision makers are a little, they want a little bit faster, bullet points, and they want a little more instinctual type messaging. Okay? So we talked about Cynic previously. Start with why. Remember this model? So Apple does this. He uses that in his examples, starting with why. Why are we here? Well, because we want to change people's lives. That's what Apple's why is, with the most incredible technology you've ever seen. How? Very simple to use and cutting edge. What? It's an iPhone or a Mac. They start. Now, my sister has a master's in educational science, and I think we've had 5 people in my family who've been teachers, and they've all used this framework. It's called Format. The Challenger sale teaches 3 things. Now, there's a lot of things in the Challenger sale I don't agree with, and a lot of the execs that I've rubbed elbows with feel that the science behind it, the research behind it was faulty, but they did get 3 things right. Teaching, tailoring, taking control of the sale. Okay? Teaching. That's really our job, isn't it? Teaching prospects, teaching customers. That's what we want our salespeople to do, is to teach. This is the most widely used, most successful teaching framework that you can use. Underneath that is the andragogy, pedagogy, all that kind of cool stuff, but the Format framework basically tailors your teaching to certain learning types. Okay? However, it's out of sync with Cynic, and it also misses a lot of things that we need in product marketing. So here is the 4-story framework. I use this extensively. You start in the basement and you tailor your research. And this goes well beyond your typical personas. Don't have time to go into the details today. And then you move up a story to Act 1, and you want to understand their situation, so that aligns with SPIN, S-P-I-N, and you want to teach them, and this aligns with the different profile types. We found that there's 9 profile types out there, 9 distinct profile types that fall into those 3 triads: emotional, instinctual, logical. Just the way our brains are wired. Okay? This is an example. I'm going to pick on Booz Allen a little bit here because it's fun. So Booz Allen, this is what I see a lot, and what I used to do earlier in my career. You start with an introduction, maybe a little problem statement, and then bam, you're right into the logical facts about how cool your stuff is and your products. Okay, that's how you don't do it. This is a cube you can use to balance that out better. Act 1, Act 2, 2B, and then into Act 3, and you can see the emotions you're trying to convey, right? And now, with anything you build, whether it's content, website, sales enablement tool, whatever it might be, this is an example of how you would line that up. Okay? This is another example. This was done for Fortinet. Okay? And this is how you would build a messaging guide. Okay? So a lot of words here. I don't like words, but this is just an example of how you would build out your actual messaging guide so that anyone in the organization can see how they're supposed to use the stuff you build. Okay? This is actually one for Morphosec. Shows you where to put your value props and your capabilities: emotional, instinctual, logical appeal, easy, effective, efficient. Right? So the words you're using, what you're saying in these particular things, that's how you line it up, and that's how you deliver it across the web page. This is one for Malwarebytes. Who, why, how, what. Right? Just like that. Lines up. This is for video storyboarding. So, true story, one company, I won't say who it's for, we spent $37,000 to get 2 videos done, and they were terrible. It's awful. And that's because they didn't do this. They didn't really outline the story. They didn't give us a storyboard that walked us through the kind of story that we wanted to be able to tell. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to, next time around, create my own storyboard, and then they can clean it up and make it better. But this walks you through 1, 2, and 3, and the video comes out much, much better, and by the way, costs you a lot less money. This is presentations. It's also done for Malwarebytes. So you're telling a story in the certain colors, the visual effects. There's tones that you can use. For example, in sales enablement, in Act 2, you want to have a faster, more staccato tone, right? If you read James Patterson, that's what he does. His sentences become shorter. His chapters become shorter. He's got far more active verbs. It's bam, bam, very fast-paced, like a freight train. Okay, that's Act 2. and then you slow it down for Act 3, and you're calmer now, right? More logical. You can do the same thing in a PowerPoint. You can do the same thing on any of the content that you build. Okay? Examples of playbooks you can do this for. This was for some folks, and you can actually pop in the fields for this into your CRM so that when a salesperson is dealing with a particular customer, they can have the fields with the information right there in terms of what will resonate with that prospect. And apps and so forth. This was done by Aventi Group. AventiGroup.com did these. They're for the tech industry, so they've used this for the tech industry. And then last but not least, this is a really cool app. This was actually built by a company called Remotely Me. And the reason I like these guys is because they were started by some fellow Navy veterans. We go back a ways. And they created this app. You can go up to LinkedIn with the app, and you find somebody's profile, and you click on it, and then you click on one button, and it will extract all the information out of their LinkedIn profile and do a complete analysis on it and tell you what their messaging preferences are. It uses NLP and all kinds of cool stuff, and then it gives your salespeople or marketers a messaging guide. This is what you say, here's what you don't say, here's what you put in LinkedIn, here's what you put on email. It's a pretty cool app, so I recommend that. And then the agency that's actually bringing this to life, I highly recommend, is 4storyagency.com. You can actually get certified in this, and they gave me a code you can use to get 50% off. Pretty cool, huh? So that's it. I did bring a couple of books, not many, but people have asked me, so happy to provide some books to people if you want, but this won't be out, this book won't be out till next year. Time for questions. Anybody? You used a mix of B2B and B2C examples. Do you think this type of messaging process has a bigger impact than one or the other? Work on either side. So again, neuromarketing is pretty popular over in the B2C side today. It's being used by a lot of different companies, as I mentioned earlier. So you can absolutely, in fact, it's being done in many respects more for B2C than B2B. However, I think B2B could actually have more of a use for this because it hasn't been used on that side of the fence hardly at all. And there's an opportunity for people to be able to do that, I think. Another question over here.
Thank you so much, Bill. I'm geeking out so much about what you're presenting. I've actually
Figured you would.
I've added your books to my Goodreads list, so I'm going to be ordering them this weekend. One debate I've had with others over the years is this approach whereby you're bringing the emotional, the instinctual, and the logical together into your story. Some people say, it's a very American thing to do. You know, in Germany, emotional will never be part of it. I disagree. I'd like to know what you think.
You bet. My wife's from England, so and have done a lot of work over in England, as well as around the world, and have been exposed to a lot of different cultures. I was a Navy brat, so I grew up in Turkey, of all places. Yeah, so, but we have actually recently used this for European distribution and partners, and it works just fine. So again, brains are kind of universal, as far as I know. I think we all have pretty much the same kind of brains. Okay, maybe Europeans are a little different, a little weird. I'm kidding. But I think it's universal. Anywhere you go, you're gonna see the same thing everywhere. All right, so anybody ready for a knock-knock joke? Ready for a knock-knock joke? Okay, knock-knock. Knock-knock, come on. Nobody. Sorry, you forgot to do your marketing properly. Come back tomorrow. Okay, another one. Knock-knock. Solution brief. Can't tell you until you fill out these 25 fields in this form online. Get the download. That's it.
We got a question right here.
All right, got a question back here.
So I'm thinking through, that again, nerding out on the information here. As you sort of, bring that arc through, oftentimes we talk about how the world is shifting, and we sort of lead with that. Hey, you've got to move because the rest of the world's moving around you, and there's winners and there's losers. Is the idea to move that into the second act, the sort of 2B, so that you're really saying if you just stay where you're at, and if you don't understand this, then others are going to overtake you? Or is it, help me understand that sort of relationship of that, all those market trends that we all know so well and use and employ?
Yeah, I think probably the best way to describe it is with an example. So let's say you were trying to sell somebody something, whatever it might be. Initially, and most sales methodologies teach this, but they don't really go into the science that's really going on behind it. You walk onto the stage, if you will, and you want to create a more friendly or emotional atmosphere. You want that person to like you. And at that point, you're not talking about problems, right? Typically, in an initial conversation with someone, you're not diving into their deepest problems. You're just you're having a conversation. You're talking to them, getting to know them, a little bit more friendly. So it's more about their situation. What's going on in your infrastructure? What's going on in your organization? How are things? And then you gradually move them into the problem phase of it, and you start to uncover some of these problems. But again, we're teaching. And so we want to bring the teaching aspect of that into 2B. 2A, we're uncovering some of these problems. And again, this is where most sales and marketers leave off. We'll uncover a couple of problems and then leap directly to Act 3 to solve the problems. Especially guys, right? We're problem solvers, like, oh, I can solve that problem. That's not what we want to do. That's the hardest part. So in that respect, to answer your question, you want to ensure that in 2B, you are giving them information that raises the stakes. And as an example, when talking to prospects in the cybersecurity industry, all of them say, oh, I'm concerned about ransomware, concerned about this, concerned about that. And what we've taught our salespeople to do now is to say, hey, have you heard about the latest state civil codes? The latest what? The latest state civil codes. There's 50 of them in the US. Europe's got GDPR, a couple other things that are similar. If you don't properly protect the information and you can't prove that you didn't, right? Even if you did, you can be fined, you can be sued, and even if you win, it'll cost you millions. That's what's going on with the new state civil codes. And you'll see top executives lean forward, and I've seen this on Zoom calls, they'll lean forward in their seat and they go, can you tell me more about this? That's Act 2B. If we do that properly, it's hard not to get a sale. It really is. And then you can take them logically into how to prevent that disastrous consequence. Okay, anything else?
Any other questions? I think it would be the last one of the conference if anyone has one. Going once, going twice. Okay, let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.